Hello and welcome to the very first initiation of WeRecomposing podcast. WeRecomposing is my practice that integrates mycology, the study of fungi, and astrology, the observance and celebration of changing seasons and celestial movements from Earth's perspective. Happy Aries season and Spring Equinox. I'm releasing this first little vocalized interweb mycelium, partially to celebrate the Spring Equinox, which celebrates the midway point between the winter solstice and the summer solstice. So I see the honeybees beginning to come out, first little crocuses, purple and white. The snow is beginning to melt, temperatures warm up. Our cycles with the sunshine are one of our luminaries, the other of which being Moon, who reflects, the sunshine. As our cycles are changing, we extend out into the lightness and leave behind some of our darkness. During this time of the season, I encourage all of you to reflect on how your darkness nurtured you, how the darkness was your ally, and how you can use these allies and this wisdom and carry it forward into the lightness. So welcome. Just feel yourself. You're breathing deeply and listening to this little journey in which my intention is to discuss mycoastrology and what this is, what this story includes, and how the spirals, the polarities, the movement, and the symbolism between fungi and the cosmos are interconnected. One of the ways I observe mycoastrology is that I write about it. On my blog, you can go to WeRecomposing because, this story is about not only decomposing and decaying, but also recomposing and giving birth, rebirth, and regenerating ourselves and our environment around us. So, WeRecomposing.com or WeRecomposing.blogspot.com. And let's see, my last blog post and mycoastrology writing was about the Virgo full moon, which was exact on Monday, March 9th. And I wrote about the fungus that was associated, who was the amethyst deceiver, or Lacaria amethystina. So this is a really fun story. I would love anybody who is interested to reach out, and I really like hearing how this makes so much sense to people, and how it feels so good to hear these two languages connected in such a way. So check out my blog. I love sending out email cilium. So if you want to be a part of that, send me your email somehow, email, Instagram, or go to my website and subscribe for email cilium updates, which I will send you on new and full moons and sometimes for the spaces in between. I give astrology consultations and readings. I love this experience to connect with you personally. So if you're interested, I do anything from current transits readings to looking at your natal chart, or intuitive mushroom readings to see what kind of fungus the cosmos is reflecting in you. I am currently cultivating mushrooms, or beginning to, small-scale cultivation. I'm super excited to see where this will go. And I did have on store from my calendar various teaching days and, community activities, but honestly, I don't know where they stand considering our current world climate. So, keep tabs on those. I am definitely figuring out different virtual opportunities that we can sporulate and myceliate with each other on. So let's dive into the mycoastrology story, shall we? You might be coming from more of an astrological understanding, or maybe an ecological background. You may have foraged mushrooms before. Maybe you're sipping on some reishi tea right now. I'm going to try to briefly describe kind of the originations of both of these things and how they're really entangled within one another. I'm going to open up our discussion by thinking about the cosmos and when fungi first arrived on Earth. How are the Earth and cosmos intertwined? Well, we do know that elder fungi have watched over the world's evolution and are among the most overlooked contributors to the history of of this planet. Fungi have found new habitats to dwell within and to support the life around them. And along the way, as beings around them died, fungi helped recompose their bodies into the next generation. Fungi have spread across time, perhaps across space, and hold on to ancestral forms that retain the same potency as they did long ago. Similar ancestral ancient medicine as astrology. If we take a gander at the Earth's history, you've probably heard this little kind of toy. It's fun to think of this pattern this way. If Earth was compressed into a 24-hour day, and today was midnight on that clock, so, 24-hour day of Earth's history, fungi may have evolved as long as 18 hours and 40 minutes ago. It's a long time in the 24-hour span of Earth's history. In comparison, me and my partner have surmised that plants have existed for somewhere around 5 to 6 hours, since they're thought to have evolved about 1 billion years ago. That's like a third of fungal existence. 18 hours versus like maybe 6 hours of plant life. So modern humans have existed for 1 second. Yep, 1 second. 180,000 years ago. So yeah, we're going to go into Earth's creation this far back to see how fungi and the cosmos met. Earth condensed from a cloud of space dust 4.5 billion years ago and was soon after struck by Theia, who was a protoplanet or a developing planet and roughly about the size of Mars, who is about half the size of Earth. So Theia, this name we've given to this developing planet who struck aggressively and miraculously Earth, this name is Greek for goddess or divine, and in the Homeric hymn to Helios was referred to as the far shining one, who I think is just lovely. So Theia was the mother of Helios, who is sun, Selene, moon, and Eos, who is the dawn. So this collision created debris, and it was a huge direct impact that caused a very thorough mixing of both of these planetary parents, Theia and Earth. It's also funny that the sound th is included in both of these, at least in the English pronunciation of Earth and our understanding of Theia. But anyway, the collision created lots of debris and 2 moons, the smaller of which remained in orbit for a little bit of time and then kind of merged into the other moon, who is the moon that we know now that we can look up to and see every night. If we are in, an unpolluted, without light pollution, and if it's a clear night without any air pollution as well. So this impact between Theia and Earth was a direct hit, like I mentioned, causing a thorough mixing, right? Mixing, a blending of both of these planetary bodies. So we have this moon, we have this Earth, and while the moon, it began to slowly migrate outward away from Earth, and this simultaneously slowed down Earth's spin. It just kind of, it dragged on Earth, if you can imagine that movement pulling outward. So at first, it's thought that Earth had a 5-hour day. Imagine that, right? Like Earth spinning a complete revolution in 5 hours. And over billions of years later, here we are with the good old 24 hours that we know. For some planetary comparison, Saturn has a 10 and a half hour day, and Mercury a 58 Earth day. So for every 58 Earth days, Mercury experiences 1 day of lightness and darkness. And Pluto's days are about 6.4 Earth days, whereas it also takes Pluto about 248 years to orbit around the Sun, and the Earth 364 days. So it's also thought that during Earth's formation, it experienced dozens of these little collisions with planet-sized bodies, but this moon-forming collision was the only giant impact that had lasting impact, or perhaps it was the most recent significant celestial impact that we know of. Oceans slowly cooled, solid material condensed into Pangaea, the sterile rock, and anywhere between zero point 0.4 and 1 billion years later, cell-based life arose mysteriously. It's generally assumed that the first cell was a simple prokaryote or one bacterium, but this is also very contested, and not many agree on this first cell's form or place or exact time and the means by which this cell developed. The most commonly accepted theory you may have heard about is called the primordial soup theory. And this theory basically describes that there was a perfect blend of chemicals that were floating somewhere in an ocean or in a pond or some Pangaean atmosphere, who accidentally all collided and formed proteins capable of reproducing RNA or amino acids and DNA and even a cell membrane. Francis Crick, one of the discoverers of DNA structure, and an astronomer named Sir Fred Hoyle, and I'm sure countless other humans, like myself, have argued that spontaneous occurrence of this primordial soup theory is so beyond statistical probability that it should probably be considered, in fact, highly implausible. So, life on Earth, therefore, must have been introduced from somewhere, from outer space. Cue the dun dun dun. But so another theory of life's origination is called panspermia. And this theory, panspermia, describes that Earth originated from microorganisms or possibly chemical precursors who were present in outer space somewhere and able to initiate life when they landed in a suitable environment, similar to how spores, when they're released from the hymenium or the reproductive kind of surface of mushrooms, once they are released, they have to land somewhere supportive of their growth, or else they will not take and they will not germinate. So this theory, panspermia, is also similar to the next theory that I'm going to introduce to you all, called pansporia. So I'm sure you can kind of guess what pansporia might mean. If panspermia is the theory that life originated on Earth from microorganisms basically in space, then pansporia is the theory that life originated on this planet from precursors who were purely of fungal origin. This is kind of a fun idea, right? Space mushrooms. I mean, there have been movies and stories, and in our imaginations, we recede back to these depths, these layers of thinking about this kind of stuff all the time. But when we think about life, how it could have started, what it is, it's not about one thing. Life is, of course, a multitude of dimensions. Oh, I just got goosebumps. Connections. All of us are a part of one thing, which includes our multifaceted understandings and perspectives. So it's really perhaps more plausible that a, mini ecosystem of fungi and algae and probably nitrogen-fixing cyanobacteria that we call lichens served as the sort of inoculum of ancient Earth. This microcosm, this mini ecosystem, is so much more plausible to me. I mean, if we think about forests as they are, a tree can't exist by itself. Most likely, 90% of that time, a tree is going to have some sort of fungal symbiont or relationship with it, providing the tree so much more water and nutrients to survive. The fungus might even travel through mycelium up into the tree, providing structural support in ways that we haven't even been familiar with for very long. In recent years, astrobiologists have performed numerous experiments looking at how microbes, fungal spores, molds, and lichens can survive extreme conditions of outer space and they can even crash onto a planet while still being inside of a comet and survive. So this kind of stuff is fascinating. There are two lichens in particular, Rhizocarpon geographicum and Xanthorrhea elegans, or elegans. Xanthorrhea elegans, most likely, is how to pronounce that one scientifically. But, honestly, I don't even know what these two lichens look like. I should look up what they look like. They probably have a lot of color to them. Let's look them up. Oh, yeah. Xanthorrhea elegans is like this bright, it almost looks like the color of a lobster mushroom. This just like ochre red lichen. It looks like a sunburst just like fruiting out their little tiny cups. They're beautiful. And then the rhizocarpon species is like it's like a lime kind of green, almost like a split pea soup color, and it looks all cracked. And this one looks more kind of like a almost a pathogen, just in the way it's spreading. It looks a little bit like a slime mold. So these two species of lichens seem to be actually completely unaffected by radiation, and they've been in studies where they are placed in low Earth orbit for about 2-week periods, and then upon retrieval on Earth, these two lichens begin to photosynthesize. And they not only that, they photosynthesize at the same rates that they did prior to their exposure to any radiation whatsoever. Another curious example of fungal-related space encounters is this fungus you may have heard of called Cryptococcus neoformans. And you may have recently seen some media coverage about this black fungus. Cryptococcus neoformans was first described scientifically in the 1890s and has really been known to be a really unforgiving microorganism for humans. If it gets into people with compromised immune systems, they will get the infection called cryptococcosis. So this dark black fungus actually has been seen growing on the walls of the Chernobyl nuclear reactor. Right? Yeah. This is like baffling to scientists. Due to this extreme radiation heavy environment, scientists are like, what? This is amazing. So this fungus, Cryptococcus neoformans, was first seen growing on the walls there in 1991, only 5 years after the most destructive radioactive explosion that humans have seen on Earth. Interestingly, this fungus is also beneficial for humans because it contains high levels of melanin, which is kind of a trait of many fungi and lichen who can absorb radiation. And so this high level of melanin allows in this case, this fungus to turn the radiation into chemical energy, similar to the process of photosynthesis with plants. And this process has been called radiosynthesis. This fungus, Cryptococcus neoformans, is actually being tested against radiation on the International Space Station. It was sent up in November of 2019 with Johns Hopkins University. So we might see some space-approved sunscreen from extracting the melanin from Cryptococcus species. Pretty cool. One more example is that Dr. Ekaterina Dadachova wrote a paper in 2008 that pointed out that these radiation-attracted fungi are probably not the first of their kind. So interestingly, large quantities of highly melanized fungal spores have been found in early Cretaceous period deposits when many species of animals and plants just so happen to die out. This period in the Cretaceous period also coincides with Earth's magnetic reversal, which resulted in the loss of its shield against cosmic radiation from some kind of a big disruption in Earth's magnetic field. So it's interesting that there are huge fungal spore deposits, melanized fungal spore deposits, around this Cretaceous period when there was such a big disruption in Earth's magnetic field. There could have been a lot of creatures dying, and fungi could have really ramped up and decomposed and been a large part of regenerating Earth to become a new place for birth and life. So When we look at fungi, they don't actually fossilize like how plant tissue does and animal tissue. There's strong evidence of fungal growth in 3.5 billion year old volcanic glass from the ocean floor. That's a long time ago. Remember, we just said that the Earth was formed and condensed 4.5 billion years ago. There's also some undescribed fungi who have been found in ancient oceanic basalt deposits. And then I'm sure you've heard of the prototaxites. If not, let me tell you about them. So, long before trees overtook the land, Earth was covered by these really tall, wide structures, like 24 feet tall, 3 feet wide, giant spires, who were actually mushrooms. Or at least some sort of fungus and some sort of mycelial mass. So, these prototaxites became extinct more than 350 million years ago, and they're a very confounding organism. They were once thought to be some kind of a conifer or an algae, but they have these identifying factors of being mixotrophic, so that means they're capable of deriving nutrients from multiple sources in their environment. They have similar carbon isotopes as fungi, yet they're composed of plant-like polymers. So they're a confusing organism, these prototaxites. Thanks to a very recent study done by Dr. Linda Graham in February 2020, as well as various studies following up to this, we have really now understood them as being trunk-like structures inside of which there were these narrow tubes that were most likely fungal hyphae, or the threads of cellular structure that connects all of these mushrooms that we see. You know, hyphae are just an individual strand of mycelium, basically. So prototaxites were seemingly some kind of mutualistic relationship between fungi and maybe this liverwort, who are sporulating, named Merchantia polymorpha, which really supports our evidence of that theory that we haven't given a name to yet. Maybe we'll call it like, pancosmia. I love that. Pancosmia. Oh, beautiful. Um, somebody's perhaps has already thought of that for this or has named something else pancosmia, but I love it. Let's flow with it. So, pancosmia, which is the theory that the precursors of life were not just microorganisms, were not just fungi, but some mini ecosystem of Earth's ancient inoculum that definitely relied on fungi, algae, and or lichens. Just how ancient are these associations between microbes, lichen, plants, and fungi? All right, we're back on Pangaea, the sterile land formation, just a rock. And the only nutrient source for any organisms on Pangaea would have been rocks, minerals, organic compounds of any sort, and then any accumulating bodies of dead microbes. This Pangaean environment would have also been very oxygen poor and sulfide rich, so just very extreme environments. The first eukaryotes would have thus only been able to live if they could digest rock, eat dead organisms, and survive in extremely anaerobic or otherwise harsh environments. Sound like anybody we know? Yeah, fungi. So fungi actually kind of check off all these boxes. They do actually eat rocks. Fungi produce small organic acids to release nutrients from the rocks that go back into the soil webs. We can refer to this study as geomycology. And of course, our decomposers. Hey, fungi are responsible for 90% of all decomposition on Earth. They are also extremely capable of surviving atypical environmental conditions, and they will also allow nearby trees and cacti and plants and organisms to be more regenerative and resilient. One thing we do know is that plants evolved when a eukaryotic cell, so a eukaryotic cell is more complex than a prokaryotic cell, who we've previously mentioned, And a eukaryotic cell could be any protozoa, fungus, plant, or animal. So we do know that plants evolved when this complex eukaryotic cell engulfed a photosynthesizing cyanobacterium. Weird. This engulfing formed a beneficial endosymbiosis, which means that this relationship between this eukaryotic cell, who engulfed the cyanobacterium, the relationship between the cell and the cyanobacterium was beneficial and consensual to both organisms. The mysterious eukaryotic cell and the cyanobacterium actually lived better together, quite possibly, and likely only existed because of one another. We also know that fungi are the ones responsible for this modern-day mechanism. One species of fungi in the Glomeromycota group, there are 4 main different groups of fungi who just kind of are a little bit different creatures. So this species in the Glomeromycota group is called Geosophon piriforme, and this fungus can actually host a cyanobacteria species inside of the fungus's swollen hyphal tips, essentially inside of the fungus's mycelium, right? Hyphae is one of the mycelium strands, and inside of the hyphae tips, which are swollen. This glomeromycotin relationship is actually found all over the world, and especially in places of wet soil and poor inorganic nutrients. The underlying symbiosis may have actually led to the development of fungal plant animal life as we know it. And of course, fungal plant animal, humans are animals. We share more genetic similarity with fungi than with plants. During the same time that this all happened with the eukaryotic cell engulfing some sort of cyanobacterium, this was about 900 million years ago, and the animal queendom, or xendom, actually separated from our fungal ancestors at around the same time as this happening. This is all so fascinating to me, so beautiful to imagine and to think about. Questioning the origins of how any of this got here, how we, me and you, and these mushrooms started popping out of the soil and the trees, how any of this got here is so greatly astrological. So how? You're probably thinking. So I practice tropical astrology, also known as seasonal astrology, and this is a practice of earth-based medicine that honors the dance of polarities and changing seasons as Earth spins around Sun. Tropical astrology is not necessarily centered around constellations, but rather seasonal light and the play between lightness and darkness and everything in between. As Earth rotates around Sun, a variety of forces pull on Earth throughout our lunar orbit. Water, dreams, flowers, mushrooms, moods, moons, energy, we all pulse and flow in an ever-changing transformation between polarities throughout the day, throughout the night, and throughout the year. Tropical astrology is a way of sensing and orienting ourselves to the Earth, to each other, to the gravitating cosmos, and to ourselves. The language of astrology is a very creative, symbolic, associative, oftentimes spiritual and divine interpretation of astronomical data. Cultures and mythologies all have their unique distinctions, of course. However, all of our ancestors practiced methodical observations of the night sky. Variants of astrological systems can be found across the planet and can be traced back to the earliest recorded civilizations like the Nubians, Iranians, Maya, Egyptians, Chinese, Indians. So the practice that I observe, tropical astrology, originates from the Greek and Hellenistic systems, which undoubtedly tremendously were influenced by the earth-based stories and traditions of the local Babylonian, Phoenician, Mesopotamian, and East Mediterranean peoples prior to any Greek colonization. Astrology is a language of complexity, and of relationship and of entanglement. This language unites us into a perspective of inquiry and of interconnectedness. We often have a tendency to believe we exist as separate entities who are independent from one another. And sometimes things happen that allow us to really viscerally feel our interconnectedness with others. Something recently that has happened in our planet has been the introduction of the coronavirus. And, I'm releasing this on Friday, March 20th, so in celebration of the Spring Equinox, Aries season, and just, of all of us and our health and our interconnectedness in mycoastrology altogether. It's definitely a scary, unstable time. And the one thing that has really hit most with me has been how we've all really dialed up on how we are aware of our interconnectedness. I'm hearing people talk about, for the first time really in my life, I'm hearing them talk about not overusing resources and being so much more conscious with what they are consuming, which is incredible. I find that listening to and receiving not only our own cycles, our own moon cycles, our hormonal cycles, um, energetic cycles, sleep cycles, as well as each other's cycles, but also fungal cycles, looking at when fungi fruit, how they fruit, and astrological cycles can really inform our perspective. We have an earth-based perspective, and through this interconnectedness, we can really lean into and align with the tenuous nature of reality and embrace biodiversity, embrace humanity, and participate in our daily lives in a mindful, present, heart-centered way. When we take into account the decay, the transformation, the rebirth that's behind everything and every single one of us, I find it adds a lot of groundedness and a lot of compassion. And it really helps me just feel. It helps me fill out my cells, I notice. They just become more vibrant and alive. And honestly, it helps me become more peaceful and more centered and a little bit more quiet. It's funny how these complexities and these entanglements and this talk of polarities I'm about to go into really, in essence, uncovers the quietness within. It's interesting, usually when talking about our current state of interconnectedness and complexity within relationship to one another, I do have a tendency to see how isolated and severed collective consciousness has been articulated recently. It's so interesting that the structure of collective isolation is has an immense opportunity to be rewired in many ways right now. And I'm seeing this really play out with, everything from our economies to our political leadership and policies, and, elevating the voices of scientists and experts, and, everybody digging deep into keeping centered and keeping connected in a time of social distancing. Really fascinating that we're also living in what astrologists call to be the age of Aquarius, this state of technological advancement, networks, revolution, and oftentimes disassociation and isolation as well. Aquarius is one of 12 zodiac signs in tropical astrology and is mentored by two signs, Saturn and Uranus. Many say that the Aquarius age is still forthcoming and that we're still on a cusp between the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarius. The age of Pisces has foundations of meditation, fragility, disillusion. It's a time when saviors are sought, claimed, and asserted. At the same time, Pisces is also a state of transcendence and where we understand that magic is here now and that we can actively participate in this unfolding. In this year's astrology, Saturn is actually moving into Aquarius, its home, where they feel the most abundant and electrified with resources to do what Saturn does best. Saturn actually has two homes, by the way, the other of which is Capricorn. So Saturn has been in Capricorn for the past few years. And on Saturday, March 21st, that's right, just in a couple of days or in tomorrow, depending when you listen to this, or maybe last week, on March 21st, Saturn moves into Aquarius, which is even more fascinating. There's so much Saturnian energy. Saturn is, this structure and isolation, right? We are in this time of social distancing for the first time that many of us have probably ever experienced this. Such a time calls for maturity, responsibility, groups of friends and organizations to be honorable and quarantine ourselves. And this is so Saturn. This is so Aquarius. So this first little baby breath of Saturn into Aquarius is actually just the first little flavor, the first little taste. Saturn's going to retrograde in early May. So between now, March 21st, and early May, we're going forward, taking our first breaths in airy, spacious Aquarius. And then retrograde in May, we re-enter Capricorn in July. So Aquarius retraces their steps on the threshold between Capricorn and Aquarius. Saturn stations direct one more time, and then we'll officially enter Aquarius in December of 2020. Effectively, Saturn's time in Aquarius will be from December 16th, 2020 to March 7th, 2023. The last time we saw Saturn in Aquarius was in February of 1991 to January of 1994. And I'm pretty sure it was 1991 that the first www.url actually came into being. The prior Saturn in Aquarius transit happened in 1962 to 1964, which was very much the foundational, unprecedented wave of the 60s. So as we begin to enter into Saturn in Aquarius, in possibly the beginning of the age of Aquarius, we develop new structures. We revolutionize old forms of limitation, how you limit yourself, and really more likely how we have limited the collective, how we've limited our social groups. So even if you think astrology is a bunch of mumbo jumbo, a bunch of woo, and you're really listening to this because I don't know why, because maybe it's like story time with Gabriela and I'm lullabying you to sleep. I encourage you between now, March 21st or so, through early May, to think about how you are collaborating and committing to group heart and the collective causes that you really care about. I encourage you to consider where you experience contraction, rejection, and slow processes of maturation and obstacles in your life. Straight up, where do you have obstacles in your life? This is Saturn. Something to think about in this transit between March 21st and March 7th of 2023, is about our individualism and our connectivity. Being an Aquarius represents being in the mycelium, really. I do a lot of, in my mycoastrology, I associate different mushrooms and fungi with astrology and with zodiac signs. And often I really think of Aquarius as being the mycelium, being this vast web of interlocking hyphae that share and spread genetic information, plasma, DNA, from tree to tree, from fungus to tree, from the ground, and extracting resources that are necessary for life to rebirth, necessary minerals in our soil that are unlocked that need to be recycled and basically rethought of into something in our environment that other organisms can then use. Aquarius is liberation. Aquarius is using your resources to feed the group heart. So there's something about our individualism and our connectivity that will help us glean wisdom from the past to build a regenerative, to rebirth a better future and a more responsive present moment. So it is, as scary as it is and as uncertain as so many of us are, it is a little bit wonderful to think of the interrelatedness between all of these cycles that are happening cosmically and what the Earth and you and I are experiencing. In this time of social distancing, I'm not sure how long it'll last. I am not going to be predictive in that way with astrology, but I am responsive and reflective with astrology. And I do think that astrology can lend many illuminations into how our society is changing, evolving, transforming, large societal collective transitions, as well as personal and psychological states and dimensions. During this time of social distancing, do not act with lack of concern for humanity. It's really easy to disassociate, to isolate, and to detach. So don't compromise your humanity. Society is inherently complex, and we totally have ingrained attitudes and feelings and biases. And also, this is all happening in Aries season. Aries is the first of 3 fire signs in our zodiac wheel, and the first spark of life. Aries asks, "Who am I? Who are you?" And in an Earth-centered perspective, Aries asks, "Where are you?" As a fire sign, being in Aries season, the qualities of intuition, primal energy, spirit, and innate awareness of individuality and purpose is very active. It is a little bit more attainable, and we have more of an opportunity to feel in to Aries wisdom as the sun illuminates this zodiac sign. So Aries is always in the process of becoming, and I think that's really what we can speak of right now, right? Take each day one step at a time and allow this fiery energy to travel a little bit inward if it can't really extend outward. Do not compromise your humanity with Aquarius and with Saturn. Use this Aries fire to consciously connect and adapt with our place on Earth right now. Is your fire conscious? What are you doing with your energy, both external and internal? Or is your fire unexamined? How do you waste your resources? All kinds of resources, not just physical resources, emotional, spiritual resources. Where do you burn out? How can you wisely contain and build and devote yourself to this sacred flame and utilize the gifts that you've been given. So in light of this time, especially relating to Aquarius, possibly the Aquarius age, and definitely Saturn moving into Aquarius on Saturday, this quote has been sticking with me a lot this week. And I heard of it through Adi Ashanti, who is a wonderful spiritual guide. And I would just love to share this quote. It's important that the awake people are awake, for the darkness around us is deep. It's important that the awake people are awake, for the darkness around us is deep. This is from William Strafford, who was a poet in the 16th century. So, kind of closing things up a little bit, astrology speaks to mycology because astrology, we're dealing with a bunch of cycles and things that are connected and interconnected, all these different planets. Let's take Saturn, has their own relationship with Pluto and Mars and Jupiter, and they all have different timings, and we can observe how these movements are reflected in our psyches, in our spirits, in our observations on Earth. Fungi have been so grounding for me. Fungi are incredible. I find fungi to be one of our strongest allies in so many things. I kind of find fungi to be our north node in a way, like pulling us toward our evolution, helping us slow down, observe our immediate surroundings, take in our senses, smell what's around us, touch, taste. How does it taste? Maybe bitter. Maybe you want to spit it out. Maybe it's poisonous. You can often smell a mushroom before you find them with your eyes. The fungal consciousness is booming, and it is beautiful. I am so happy that so many of us are aligning to fungi and their wisdom and their cycles and what they can do with us and our bodies and our brains and our hearts, our nervous system, what they can do with our daily rituals. And at the same time, astrology has been gaining so much momentum as well. Both of these languages really kind of take us out of our human existence a little bit in an interesting way. They ground us to something greater. And they're also very centered around polarity. And they play with polarity in an interesting way that doesn't make it simply polarity. So when we think of polarity, we can think of yin and yang. Yin being the more inward, receptive energy, and yang being the more outward, exerted energy. Yin, inside of yin, is truly the essence of yang, and inside of yang, well, is really the essence of yin. They can't exist without one another. This quality is encoded in the fungi and astrology. As astrology observes the changing of lightness and darkness throughout our seasonal shifts, we reflect on, emotional, psychological impacts, collective impacts, and how we flow together. It's a great language to be able to talk about with your friends and your loved ones. I thoroughly appreciate it and think of it as medicine, truly, a very wonderful tool. And then when we think of mushrooms, fungi are the grand inhabitants of realms unseen and seen. They live at the threshold between lightness and darkness. Fungi are vastly the mycelium, the underground connective networks without which we wouldn't have any of our trees, any of our delicious, nutritious foods, our regeneration with our climates and our atmospheres. But we really rely on fungi more than I think we could ever know. And then when conditions are right, when they feel groovy, Their mycelium, their hyphae, the individual strands of mycelium, will find each other and they'll form a knot or an entanglement and uproots a mushroom, a fruiting body with its beautiful colors and gills, or maybe it has pores, or maybe it's growing off of a tree and it's a conch, and maybe it's bright orange and smells really gross. Fungi are these really grand masters of the realms in between. So I find them to be incredible teachers and guides when we are on this path of inquiry, of self-inquiry, of imagination, of creating a world that is regenerative, that is loving, nurturing, also transformative, and deconstructive. I find fungi and the cosmos to be so intertwined. So I hope that this conversation continues and that these little spores are germinating in your hearts and in your imagination somehow, somewhere. If they are, please reach out. Say hi. Tell me what you love about this discussion and how you want to contribute to it. Another quote that I think is so right for right now is was I think recently shared in the past couple of weeks by Representative John Lewis of Georgia State. And he says, "We may not have chosen time, but time chose us." Tingles once again. Yeah, I mean, there's just one step at a time, one day, and I hope that you and all of your families and loved ones are in good health and can travel inward and, do something creative with this momentum that's building right now. Sit with your emotions. Don't let them eat you up, If you're feeling frustrated or nervous, write why, talk out loud, spell, put words into a row and spell out what you're feeling. Dissipate your own emotions as best as you can. And if you need help, that's why we ask mushrooms and listen to astrology and see therapists and have reliable partners and families and beautiful dogs and reliable selves who can regenerate. And you are your soul's mate, as I love to say. So, mycoastrology, it's a big whirlwind. That's where we live. This is where we live. And thank you so much for listening if you've stayed in touch for this long. If you like something about this, share it with a friend. We're all fruiting bodies. We all sporulate. We all decompose back into ourselves and back into the earth at some point. Various points, really. Multiple points throughout my day. Thank you so much for sharing this place and space with me. The fungi, cosmos, and I appreciate your support. If you want to find out more, check out WeRecomposing.com. Sign up for my email cilium to receive updates. And I look forward to sharing whatever I'm going to share with you all next. Sending you all many spores, deep love. Happy Spring Equinox.